Hello and welcome to another episode of Empower App Show. I'm your host, Leo Dion. I'm excited today to have Majid Jabrayilov on to talk about SwiftUI. Hey, Majid, how you doing?
Hi, I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's probably been a busy week, a lot to digest. What's been your overall impression of WWDC this year?
Yeah, really huge changes in terms of SwiftUI and iOS development. We have a lot of new things to cover.
Yeah, it seemed to reiterate the idea in my hope this year that it was just going to be a nice iteration over the big revelation last year. And so I was really thankful to see that a lot of things that we'd kind of been hoping for that would come came. And yeah, we have a lot to cover in this episode. So I'm really excited. Overall, what's your impression of like SwiftUI this year and the iterations that they've made? Did they do everything that was on your wish list? I guess maybe that's a good way to ask it.
Yeah, most of them, but not everything. Actually, SwiftUI, I was waiting for new approach in building interfaces for a while. And last year, when I see the SwiftUI, I was thinking that this is the way that I want to use to build apps. Yeah. So it's completely declarative. So we declare what we want to achieve, and just framework takes care about everything. That's really great. But it was pretty limited last year. So this year we saw that Apple uses SwiftUI across the macOS Big Sur to build a control center. We see that Apple uses SwiftUI for building widgets, and it makes sense. And it gives us new features that Apple released this year.
What are some of your favorite new features?
I think it's lazy stacks and lazy grids.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Overall, like I like the new way that they have set up like getting rid of essentially app delegates. That seemed like a kind of an old way to do things and kind of a hack. I'm really interested in like how that might limit my apps, but still I think it's a nice clean way of getting apps to work without some of this like honestly Objective-C cruft that I don't think is necessary anymore. Before we more get into it, I want to let you introduce yourself and kind of what you do and what's your expertise.
So I'm in the iOS developer. I build health-related apps for iOS and watchOS. So besides SwiftUI, this is what I've done beside of SwiftUI. But I start to use it since release and just rewrite all my apps in SwiftUI right now, just to learn it and give you more content.
When SwiftUI was first revealed last year, do you feel like this is what you've been looking for? Or have you been doing a lot of like functional reactive programming for a while?
Yeah. As I said, I've been waiting for new approach. I mean, in terms of declarative and functional approach, because you have to put all the lines to implement something. But SwiftUI gives us a lot of power. I mean, in terms of declarative way, so you just describe what you want to achieve, and SwiftUI will decide how to manage it for you. So it depends on for example, there are some cases where you have the same view and it can behave and present itself in different ways, depending on the parent container. For example, you can have the same view that appears in the other way in form and in other way in list. That's really great and powerful, I think.
One thing that, I agree. The declarative format or the declarative programming approach is just so much easier to deal with than the imperative approach with UIKit. Did you do what did you do before SwiftUI? Were you pretty much like a UIKit person, storyboards, like programming your UI completely? Did you do any reactive stuff beforehand?
Yeah, I did the reactive style programming with MVM, but yeah, I also use storyboards. But I think that declarative way is very well fitted in UI development. It might be not good for something else, but it's really great for UI development.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to let you know about this year's 360 iDev. It's running this year from August 16th to the 19th. I spoke last year at this conference, and I'll be speaking again. And it has a great collection of speakers. Folks you probably know from the show, like Joe Chaplinsky, Steve Lipton, Ariel Michelli, and more. 360 iDev is the premier iOS, Mac, Swift developer conference. Not only does it have a great collection of speakers, but it's a great opportunity to meet some folks online who you can connect with. For listeners of the show, you can get 20% off by using the promo code We Are Swift. Again, simply go to 360 iDev and use the promo code We Are Swift to get 20% off. This is a fantastic conference with a great collection of speakers and topics. I highly recommend you check this out. Where do you think declarative programming, what are some like pitfalls with declarative programming? Like the way I think about it is like HTML is a classic example of like declarative programming and how well that works. What do you think are some of the limitations that come with that approach as opposed to the imperative approach, where you just like send commands essentially?
So actually, yeah, there's big difference between the HTML and SwiftUI because both of them have the same declarative way, but SwiftUI is also compiled. Swift is a compiled language, and we have all the power of compiler. We can't make some mistakes that we can do in HTML. I like just putting the P in your head or stuff like that, because SwiftUI limited to compiler, and we have these rules.
I really like that point because like that's one of the powers and a lot of complaints you might hear from Objective-C folks is how strong typed Swift is. It doesn't let you do stupid stuff, like you said, putting paragraphs in your header and things like that. So one thing I want to ask is if you're going to, I guess this is an easy question, but I'm going to ask anyways. If you're going to build an app today, how do you make the decision about whether to use SwiftUI?
Yeah, I think I have to talk about the problems of SwiftUI before starting answering your question, because there is some limitations in terms of navigation that we can't very well manage the navigation flow in SwiftUI. And this is the main concern about it.
Do you mean like the fact that navigation is so hard-coded? Is that what you're talking about? Or just managing the navigation links and the navigation view and things like that?
Yeah, so the navigation is the toughest point about SwiftUI. So it's really hard to control it. It's really hard to design it. It's really hard to customize your navigation bar and stuff like that.
Let's break that down a little bit further. So so you've got, it's hard to design for, you mean like through previews essentially, right?
Yeah. So let me introduce the navigation. So how it works. Right now, mostly in SwiftUI, every SwiftUI view is the function of some state. So you have state and function, which is SwiftUI view that will render it, and you have something on your screen. Navigation looks like some side effect because it does not fit into general rules of SwiftUI. It just work like side effects because you have some navigation link, and it's somehow we can't control it. We don't know how it works. Somehow navigate to new view. So, for example, you can't create for example, array of destinations of your view hierarchy, give it to SwiftUI, and it will build all the view hierarchy. We can't do that. We can't pop to root controller or root view, stuff like that. We can't do that. And it's really hard to design your navigation. I mean, change the colors in navigation bar and stuff. So you have to go to UIKit and somehow hack it to make it work in SwiftUI.
Have you seen how like other UI paradigms that kind of follow this reactive declarative model, how do they go about it? Because like, it seems like it's so easy in SwiftUI to do dynamic stuff when it comes to like lists or for each and things like that. But then why is navigation some special case? Like, I'm just trying to think. I've done a little bit of like Vue.js, for instance, and like it isn't a big deal, but then that might be partially because JavaScript and HTML isn't so strong typed. I don't know. Like, how would you propose like a solution to that?
I think Apple tries to keep the compatibility of SwiftUI with UIKit. Yeah, that's why the navigation view is baked by UI navigation controller right now. And UI navigation controller doesn't play well with the Declaritive way. And I actually expect that the navigation changed during this dub, but it doesn't appear. So I'm hoping for the next year. But this is the things that should be changed because it doesn't fit very well in the current way of building SwiftUI apps.
What are some workarounds? I mean, if there is any workarounds, like how do you get around it?
So actually, the workaround doesn't work last year because was a lot of bugs across navigation link and navigation view itself.
Right, and they kept changing the name.
Yeah, but it looks like most of them is fixed this year. I'm checking all the feedbacks that I give to Apple, and it looks like most of them is fixed. So I'm going to investigate more into the navigation problem in SwiftUI, but I hope it will work.
So we talked about navigation management. As far as like the new stuff with App Delegate, what's your approach there? Do you think you're going to go completely in on the at main attribute, or do you think you're going to stick with scene app delegates when you build your apps?
Yeah, so at main is a new feature of Swift that allows us to mark the entry point of our apps, right? And I think it's created especially for SwiftUI to make it possible to use this new app protocol that allows us to build all the apps in SwiftUI without the UUI kit integration with app delegate or scene delegate or UI hosting controller. So I like its way. But yeah, there is some problems with app protocol because it doesn't give us all the callbacks of app delegate, like push notification handling.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of a big deal, I would think. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's another hack to use it. So Apple introduced UI application delegate adapter.
Okay.
So this is a property wrapper that allows you to combine app protocol with old style app delegate. So you can actually implement your push notification handling in app delegate and combine it with your app protocol.
Now, how about?
Yeah, it's kind of hacky.
So, have you done any watch stuff?
Yes, exactly.
Is extension delegates still required on Apple Watch apps?
That's a pretty good question.
Okay.
I didn't check it right now, but as I know, no, we don't need this extensions also.
But do you need a storyboard anymore on the watch? Because that's the one operating system where a storyboard was required because they used the WatchKit hosting controller.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know.
As I know, we don't need it this year because they showed that we don't need storyboards, and there is the single way to build apps in all platforms. So I will work on that. I have Nambot app, which is sleep tracking app.
Right.
That works on Apple Watch and iOS, but I didn't work on it right now because it doesn't compile with the Xcode beta. It uses some caramel, which is broken right now. So I'm waiting for the next build. Yeah, but as I know, it is not needed. I mean, extension delegates.
Because that would be like the best thing is just getting rid of storyboards overall. Like that was the only spot where I needed a storyboard because of the way WatchKit was set up. And then that's a great example of how we could like simplify our code and break it down a lot more. So I guess maybe going back to the question, like, do you let's say you get over the hurdle with navigation. What are some other concerns you might have when it comes to building a brand new app in SwiftUI?
So this year we have grids. And actually, this was the second main concern for the cases where you have to build some collection view stuff in UIKit. And it was pretty hard to implement with SwiftUI. For example, I was working on calendar view for SwiftUI. So it should show you some calendar grid for last 2 years, for example.
Right.
And the main problem with that view was the stacks, because stacks tries to render content immediately. And if you have really big grids like calendar where you have to show data about 2 years, and it renders really slowly and consume a lot of memory. So after this year, we have actually lazy grids and lazy stacks. So it was the second main concern after navigation. I think it is solved right now, and we can pretty easily use them.
That is one thing that I was surprised about with stacks, is how they pretty much load everything into memory. Like that's always been the case with a lot of the UI collection view and the UI table view, which looks like the UI table view is going to end up getting deprecated pretty soon. It seems like that writing's on the wall. But the whole idea is like being able to reuse your cells and being able to load that efficiently. So it looks like they're bringing that stuff that they had been doing with UIKit as far as loading new cells into how these lazy stacks are going to be working, more or less. Correct?
Yeah, actually, I think in the Declaritive framework there should no any definition between lazy stacks or not lazy stacks. I just want to say that I have to use here stack, and SwiftUI will decide should it be lazy or not. But I'm not sure why we have lazy stuff. I expect every stack should be lazy.
Actually. Well, yeah. Why do you think? Yeah, I'm curious if maybe in a few years they might deprecate one of them and everybody goes lazy. Like that does seem like a strange decision on their part, but maybe it's just because they didn't see the limitation of having to load so many items in your view like that. Because yeah, I mean that's a classic UI paradigm, is you're constantly endless scrolling VStack essentially. Yeah. Like, so yeah, that does seem strange.
I think actually it's because of backward compatibility, because right now, I assume that we have also iOS 14, and right now we're writing that code with stack, and on iOS 14 it's works lazily, and on iOS 14 it's eager, and it's really hard to build your app when you don't know how it will work on iOS 13 and iOS 14.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, are you thinking when you build a new app now, are you thinking just going all in on iOS 14 or iOS 13? Well, like, what's your decision process there?
I think it's really hard to support both of them because it's so many changes that I want to use, like lazy stacks and grids. Also some new geometry stuff that I won't really use in all of my apps. So I think I will support iOS 14 without backward compatibility.
Okay. If you want your app to succeed, there's never been a better time to read up on App Store optimization. And AppFigures provides that just for you. As I've mentioned before, they have all these great articles and guides on App Store optimization, and you can check them out and help improve your ASO. Lately, they've also started doing teardowns of specific apps like Spotify, for instance, and show exactly how they're utilizing ASO to get the best possible download results. You can take a look at their resources page at appfigures.com/resources. You can also take a look at the link in our show notes below. Try AppFigures for free, and if you like it, use our special code EMPOWER3030 to get 30% off for the next 3 months and increase your download numbers. Again, use our special code EMPOWER3030 to get 30% off for the next 3 months. Thank you, AppFigures, for sponsoring our show. So what other apps do you have out now? You have CardioBot, right? And you have a sleep tracking app?
Yeah, but it's a UIKit. Yes, CardioBot is UIKit app. So I use SwiftUI there only in Watch app.
Okay.
But right now I'm rewriting it in SwiftUI with all the new features like grids for calendars and stuff like that.
That's one thing, is how I felt about SwiftUI on the watch. Like, if there's any platform it feels like a perfect fit for, is the watch. Just because of the way, like, you don't have to worry too much about like loading too many items and things like that. Like, just the ease of use. And like it's awesome now that this year they have SwiftUI complications, which is fantastic. Like, I don't know if I have any projects as far as considering, like, honestly, my current app, which is built in SwiftUI Hard Twitch, like I don't think I'm gonna do anything as far as the new stuff because there isn't a lot I use. SwiftUI wise, but like as far as just developing the app and get it working, like the watch is the perfect place for SwiftUI if there's any spot.
Yeah, I'm totally agree with you. The Apple Watch is great to use SwiftUI, but also Apple TV.
Okay, so
Yeah,
have you built
yeah,
anything on Apple TV?
yeah. I tried to build. I actually learned something, and this year Apple presents a lot of things about SwiftUI and Apple TV. So we have all this Apple TV styled controls in SwiftUI. So
Okay.
last year we didn't have it, but they released this year that we have new card styled buttons and card styled controls that appears natively on Apple TV.
My worry about Apple TV when it comes to app developers is that they customize it a little too much.
Yeah.
We've heard horror stories about some of these TV apps and how god awful they look on the TV because they don't really use the same paradigms. But yeah, I would love at some point to dabble into it. It's never been something that like there's been a few projects where it's like, yeah, I don't even have an Apple TV for one thing. So that's part of the problem too. What's also interesting, speaking of the new stuff with SwiftUI and complications, is that a lot of new stuff is completely like SwiftUI only. And I'm thinking of widgets, right? Have you dabbled in widgets at all in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I tried to build it actually for my CardioBot app. Yeah, I'm happy to see that Apple uses SwiftUI in iOS and macOS, like Control Center in Big Sur and widgets in iOS. So we don't have any other way rather than SwiftUI to build the widgets right now, right? So it's totally a great way to start using SwiftUI and learning SwiftUI. So yeah, I tried to build it for my app. It works pretty nice.
Have you installed iOS 14 on any of your device? Well, it sounds like at least one device, right?
Yeah, I've installed it on my main iPhone.
This is the one year I'm less inclined to. Just because like there isn't a lot as far as the watch stuff is concerned that makes me desiring to install the beta right away. Honestly, it's Big Sur that's my big temptation. I put another partition of Big Sur on my MacBook Pro, and then I have a Big Sur VM. I started dabbling in some building and Apple Silicon stuff. I don't even want to get into that because it's like such a headache. But yeah, I think Big Sur is my big temptation. Have you done anything with Big Sur lately?
Nope, I didn't install Big Sur, only iOS 14 and watchOS. But I'm going to actually install it after the first beta.
Okay. What do you think of watchOS 7? Is it a big change or not much?
Actually, in terms of design, there is a lot of change. Actually, Apple is not going to use Force Touch anymore.
Yes. They finally got rid of it on the phone, and now they're getting rid of it on the watch. Actually, I missed 3D touch, to be honest with you. But as far as Force Touch on the watch, that's where it should have gone away. I never felt like that was a good paradigm on the watch. And I understand like the idea behind it because of how small the interface is. They needed to fit more things in, but I'm not going to miss it on the watch. I'll definitely miss 3D touch on the phone.
Yeah, I also enjoy Force Touch, but I feel like it's not good user experience because I use Force Touch in Sleepbot app, and actually there is some concerns from my users that they don't know there is some menu.
Right. Discoverability. That's always been the problem with I completely agree. Yeah. And besides the fact that if you put all that stuff in the phone, for instance, or maybe even the watch, that means less room for battery and like harder maintenance. And I think it was a culmination of a lot of things that ended up getting rid of that feature, which, it's unfortunate, but I can understand where they're coming from. We talked about TV. We talked about iOS. We talked about watch. How multi-platform is SwiftUI? Do you feel confident that like if you're going to build a Mac app, would you just go all in on SwiftUI? And like, how do you deal with like developing for multiple operating systems when you're building a SwiftUI app, really?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. So I built Napbot, which is sleep tracking, as I say, and it works both on iOS and watchOS. So there's, I think, maybe about 20 lines of code that uses platform-specific stuff. Yeah, it's basically shares all the code base. I just have a few if devs to check platform availability about the navigation stack because we don't have it on watchOS. That's it.
Wow.
So basically, yeah, I feel very comfortable to build multi-platform apps with SwiftUI.
NetBot is macOS and iOS and watchOS. Is that correct?
No. It's only iOS and watchOS.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say for me about macOS because I didn't build anything for macOS right now. But it's really works great between iOS and watchOS. But there is a lot of differences between these two platforms, right? We have so small screens.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
On Apple Watch, and we have big iPhones, but it works pretty well. I'm really happy to use SwiftUI to build my iOS and watchOS apps.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a fun experience in a lot of ways, and it gets over the burdens of storyboards and just UI code kit overall. Cool. I wanted to ask one more question before we close out the first half of this interview. So if you're going to build a new app today, how would you explain to a business why or why not they should build their app in SwiftUI?
You can really build an app in SwiftUI in a very fast way. Yeah. So actually, you can iterate it very fast. But there is some problems that it's learning curve because it's really hard for developers change the mind from UIKit to SwiftUI. Yeah, because it's completely different way. And in terms of business, there is some users behind iOS 13
or 13, right?
Yeah, so paying users, and
right.
It's really hard to forget about them.
Yeah, I've heard some download numbers. Some of the numbers are like 12%, 10% are still on iOS 12. Like that's a decent chunk of your audience if that's the case.
Yeah, actually, it's a huge audience. For me as indie developer, it's really easy because I don't have enough time or money to support all the variation of iOS, and I every time support just the latest one. But in terms of business, it's really hard to forget about all the users that behind this SwiftUI.
Cool. Well, let's end the first part of our conversation right now, and we'll come back in the next episode to talk more about how to iterate over old apps and introduce SwiftUI, and then we'll get a little bit more into some of the other patterns and practices and errors and testing and all that fun stuff in the next episode. Majid, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Where can people find you online?
So they can find me on my blog, actually swiftwithmajid.com. There's a lot of stuff about SwiftUI. There's also my weekly newsletter about SwiftUI, so people can find me there.
Cool, and we'll have links to that in the show notes. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode. We'll be back next week with part 2 of this discussion on SwiftUI with Majid. People can find me online at LeoGDion on Twitter or BrightDigit, my company, brightdigit.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to speaking with you again.